Okay, so what we're doing today on the Nissan 720, we're doing the clutch. And as you can see, we kind of started down there. We removed the transmission, all the bolts, the clutch, and the flywheel. And you see the starter's kind of hanging there, kind of mandatory when you're doing when you're going to remove the transmission. Anyways, down here, you can't really see what I'm talking about, but because the transmission is no longer in the vehicle, but we had to remove a top dead center bolt that hooks onto the engine. That was probably one of the most tedious things to do when removing, unbolting the transmission. We had to really get down in there, use a breaker bar, use 17-inch socket, so really wasn't too much room, and we had to use a socket wrench with a adjustable handle to get to it. So just kind of give you a reference of what that's something you might run into when you're removing the transmission from one of these vehicles without removing the engine as well. We had to remove the carburetor housing, give us a little bit more room. We didn't want to remove those EGR valves or anything, so we kind of just got around that problem. But if you come around down here to the bottom of the vehicle, as you can see, we've removed the flywheel and the clutch. As you can see, the 5 bolts there that hold the flywheel in place, torqued at 110 foot-pounds of torque. And what made this difficult, even with the transmission jack, to remove the transmission was this part here. It's like a crosswell. It's a cross member, but this part, as you can see, is part of the frame. And what happens is when you're trying to remove the transmission, you have to kind of course, unbolt it, push it back this way, and then you got to push it back forward. So you can't just drop it straight. You got to remove it down at an angle. So for those of you with the Nissan 720, or if you just happen to have this cross member, you're probably going to run into that problem. So kind of give you something to remember when you're doing this kind of a job. Then over here we have the transmission, which we kind of just put here on this little cart, kind of put gloves over it so it wouldn't leak any fluid. I power washed it the best I could. It was filled with a lot of dirt and grime. So we kind of cleaned it up somewhat. And then if you come over here, this is the old clutch. As you can see, it's pretty warped. I mean, this clutch, what's on its last leg. The other day when I was driving, I couldn't shift into gear. It made a lot of rattling noise, so we were happy to, finally get it out. And then over here is the new clutch and the new pressure plate that we're going to be installing here in a few minutes. As you can see, it's nice and smooth. It's all brand new, so we're looking forward to putting that in. Here's the new flywheel, the old flywheel, the new flywheel. There's a bunch of just scratches. This one is completely warped too. We're probably going to remachine it, even though I do have a brand new flywheel that I'm going to put in there because I just didn't want to deal with having to machine this. So I might just machine it and keep it as an extra or sell it. New pilot bearing. It's a little annoying. Pilot bushing or bearing, as some people call it, can get very difficult. Got to go get a special tool to remove this. And then here's just a few sockets. Of course, we use a lot more tools, but this little crowfoot here, I kind of wanted to point out, was actually the 17-inch that we had to use to get down into the transmission, because we couldn't actually fit the socket. So I know I mentioned socket earlier, but I meant crowfoot. We had to get down in there just to remove that. So once again, that's pretty much it with my Nissan 720. Hopefully this is helpful to those of you who are removing a transmission or a clutch or a flywheel, go ahead and leave your comments below.